Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Black Child Advocacy Network. I am your host, Tierney Cherie. I took a week break off of this program, still trying to figure out the best schedule that's going to work to do these live streams. But as of right now, I think I'm going to try to have this uploaded for Sunday night streaming if you're in the US. So basically, I want to give you an overview of what today's program is going to be about. We're going to talk about homeschooling, why homeschooling is liberation, could be liberation for you, particularly inside of a system that seems to be depleting in every single aspect. It's always been a system that was adverse to African people. It's always been a system that has attacked African people. But now we're starting to see how the system has given us this allure that we can be a part of the system, but at the same time, it's moving us towards a direction of depravity. And because of that, a lot of people are deciding to start homeschooling their children rather than subjecting their children to curriculum that is taught to them by their enemies. So that's going to be the discussion for today. I do want to remind you that for the Black Child Advocacy Network, I do have a Patreon. The materials that I'm going to be going through today will be available on that Patreon. Also, in addition, there will be a discussion group for different parents, different people who have Black children in their lives who are trying to resist the white supremacist system, the agenda of the white supremacist system. So I do want to remind you of that. But with that, we're just going to jump right into the subject of homeschooling. Okay, so we're going to get started with this video right here about Black parents who are now leaving the US system and opting for homeschooling. So let's get started with that.
You guys want to feed some animals? It may look like a simple summer outing, but these kids are at Turkey and Orchards in New Jersey for a full day of school. Here they'll learn about animals, produce, farm operations, and flowers. Good job, Maxwell.
What was the best part of today?
Feeding the animals. Feeding the animals.
These kids are part of the Melanin Village, a collective of Black families that homeschool. Parents work to make learning engaging and warm for their kids after years of feeling let down by public schools. Before the pandemic, only 3% of Black students were homeschooled. By 2021, it shot up to 16%.
And I want you to question why that is. What about the pandemic? What about the situation that we were in as African people made us go towards homeschooling? I think part of the pandemic, what actually did benefit us is that many of us realize that it is possible to homeschool. You know, the stigma towards homeschooling has always been as if this is something that you're going to lose your entire life or lose your entire career. Many of us who were forced to homeschool realize, well, that is an option. But then the other thing, obviously, is that when many people were forced to basically have to teach their child because the school was closed, they realized that their children who were given all these labels of being a problem child, their children who was being told couldn't learn certain things, actually they were figuring out that that's not true. My child actually can learn in a proper environment. I can actually teach my child this, yet you can't teach your child this inside of a regular school system. And so that is one of the things that I think, a couple of the things that I think really led to a new drive following the pandemic. We realized that we could do it, but also we realized that we could do it better than the school system was doing.
Of Fairchilds say they aren't going back.
There's a joke amongst homeschoolers that we homeschool, but we're never home.
When did you decide that this is what you wanted for your kids?
So I would say homeschooling has been both a heart and a head decision for me. I looked at the presentation of slavery and the Civil War in U.S. history textbooks, and I saw that, okay, it's not accurate. There you go.
Fairchilds founded the Melanin Village to
And it's still not accurate. You know, that's the funny thing. It wasn't accurate when I was a kid. It's not accurate even though there's this great push for critical race theory. The fact is, even if you have the right words written down in a textbook, has that person who is teaching this subject actually gone through the process that is necessary to understand what it is that they're teaching? You know, it doesn't have to be I've gone through all these teaching trainings and I know what I'm talking about with slavery, or I'm a part of these affiliations with different radical groups. The basic question really is, are you in a position to identify your problem if you are a white person? Your problem being a part of the same system that you're teaching about, being a beneficiary of the same system that you're teaching about, and the fact that every single thing that has been to your benefit as being a part of this class, this white class who's controlling the wealth and controlling the system, has been to our detriment. So literally you're sitting in a position because of our detriment. Many people can't go down that road. It doesn't matter how many trainings they've done. It doesn't matter how much critical race theory books they've read. To literally be able to admit that your benefit as being a part of this class comes at my detriment is basically class suicide. And that's what people are expecting, for white teachers to do class suicide to teach things properly, which is just not realistic. So this is another reason why we have to consider seriously, are we going to leave it up to the system to teach our children, or are we going to do it ourselves?
School materials and organized group activities with families like hers. Many frustrated that their kids weren't taught diverse history, rarely had teachers who looked like them, or got disciplined at higher rates.
We're nationwide, right? So we're not just these moms here in New Jersey, but we've got a great group of moms in Arizona, in the Chicago area, in Florida. Like, this has really surpassed my dreams.
Village moms say their kids often felt isolated or disconnected in traditional school.
Do you want to go to regular school?
No.
Not one person.
For a whole entire day, no.
In Detroit, moms Bernita Bradley and Sharice Powell say their homeschooling group, Engage Detroit, has 98 families on the roster. They expect 20 more to join before this school year begins.
We don't have time when you've seen generations after generations fail. We don't have time to keep waiting.
A very important aspect where she's talking about right here, because unfortunately in the Black community, we've been told that we just have to keep waiting for the Democrats and the Republicans to come together and do the right thing. We don't have time. We've been waiting for this system to not be a volatile system towards our people for over 400 years, and we're supposed to wait until this education system, by the way, that is just as segregated, just as monetarily depleted as it has been since its inception for our people. We're supposed to wait for the system to turn around. Meanwhile, our children are failing. Meanwhile, our children are basically being pulled into the prison system, school to prison pipeline. We're supposed to just wait around for them to decide to do the right thing. Not to mention that even if you do get a politician or a conglomerate of people who are willing to try to pull resources towards the school system, try to teach things accurately, try to have a good curriculum, even if you do have that, as with everything in America or in Western societies, all it takes is an election to change all of that so-called progress. All it takes is a movement saying we're going to take back our power from the right or even from the radical left sometimes. And that progress, so-called progress, is going to literally deplete every single gain that has been made. So we don't have time to wait on the system. It's not practical to wait on the system. And people who tell you that just wait on the system are people who probably don't have children who they're trying to save from the system.
The schools are serving Black children.
Schools were never designed to serve Black children. And we would tell them,
emphasize, schools were never designed to save Black children. We could have a whole debate even on public education, whether that was ever for us to begin with. Honestly, we can have a whole debate on that, because if you understand how public education was set up by these so-called philanthropists in order to educate a certain class of people to do their menial jobs, if you understand that, then you have to question the whole idea that my child has to be inside of an institution. But especially was not made for us. Especially was not made for the servant class, the slave class, who was supposed to basically be the ones taking care of the field, taking care of the house. It was not made for us. And so to think that it's changed suddenly and now it's for us is impractical.
basically help them understand our students. And we would tell them that our children are brilliant. It's just that you all don't try to get to know them. You don't try to get to know, like, how do they learn?
Dr. Cheryl Field Smith has studied Black homeschoolers.
Emphasize again, how do they learn? Do all children learn the same? this is not even something that's even specific to Black children, because all children learn differently. That's something that you realize, is that children learn at different speeds. They learn at different, their interests are different. If you're following their interests, they might not be interested in this right now, yet you're going to stuff it down their throat because this is what Common Core says we have to do. So this is another issue, is that we're trying to assume that children could learn at a certain pace, at a certain speed. Many times you're going below their pace. Many times whenever you're going above their pace, it's not that they can't learn it, it's that they don't have the interest to learn it now. But when you have these cookie cutter education systems, as the global, honestly, it's not just in the US, it's in the West, and the West obviously extends its tentacles to all places. These education systems are cookie cutter. They're not for the development of your individual child.
For 17 years.
We pushed really hard to get into these public schools, and now the fact that we're pulling it out, we need to pay attention to that.
As Black,
Which is a funny thing if you think about it. We really have pushed so hard to get into these public schools, and that's going to be a reason why you'll get resistance from a lot of the talking pieces, particularly on the Democratic side, because that's where you have the Al Sharptons, that's where you have the Ben Crumps, that's where you have all these people, Michael Eric Dysons, who say that they're going to talk for the community. And they're always going to push for, hey, we have to keep this going because we've been fighting for this long. But just as long as they've been fighting for it, just as long as our people have been fighting to be a part of a system, there's been a movement to withdraw from that very system. That's something that we can't forget. Just as long as there's been a movement to say we're going to join in to every single aspect of this society, there's been a movement to withdraw from it. There's been a movement to withdraw from the education system and teach your own children. There's been a movement to withdraw from the employment system. There's been a movement to withdraw from the welfare system. And yet, because the movement to be a part of the system is so beneficiary to the people who are trying to control and monitor us, that movement is the one that's been highlighted. That's the one that's been made popularized. So if you do decide to homeschool, don't feel, or even just move your child into a private schooling where it's going to be controlled by the Black community. Don't let these people guilt you by telling you that this is something our people have fought for. Same argument that they use to try to compel you to vote. It doesn't matter what's been fought for by certain segments of our community. What matters is what is in the best interest of our community. And clearly the education system is not in the best interest of our community.
Families perhaps exit public school systems. For the Black kids who get left behind, what's going to be there for them?
Not only do I worry about that, but also Black home educators worry about that.
At 15,
And it's a really interesting point, because the more that us who can withdraw our children from these schools, the more that the children who are left behind are basically put inside of a worse situation. So that's an argument that will be used to say that we have to keep our children in the school system. Well, that's why we have to think communally and not individually. That's why it's not just about withdrawing my child. That's why I actually really appreciate seeing this movement for homeschoolers, because these are literal support groups. Because the issue is that it's not just my child, it's going to be an issue with the Black community. But the more that we organize in these types of groups, this is what organization looks like, people. I've had many people ask me on my channel, what is organization? You keep saying we need to be organized. What is organization? Having this type of independent group that these two different conglomerates have created, the one in Detroit, the other one, I forget where she's located. That is, I think it's New Jersey, I believe, but that is organization. Saying that we all have a collective need. Let's support one another. Let's think of solutions for our community and not just our individual selves. That is organization. So to say that, well, we're going to hurt the children who are left in public school, no, let's get all of them out of there. Let's do it ourselves and not look to the system to do it. That's the key, though. And that's the part that's going to make a lot of people drag their feet.
Asked her mom, Bernita, to take her out of Detroit schools. She says she was being bullied relentlessly for her appearance, and it didn't seem like her administrators cared.
It made me not want to ask questions, or not want to ask specific questions, because I'm like, am I like, they gonna call me dumb?
When you transitioned to homeschooling, how did you start to feel about yourself?
I felt more confident. It was just like kind of like a sunshine, like the clouds opening a little bit.
Victor,
It's confidence because the current education system is literally created to destroy our confidence. And that's another thing that we don't think about. How many people go to school and they feel like their confidence has been destroyed from the teachers, from the testing, the standardized testing, whole nother subject right there. Maybe I'll go a whole video on standardized testing, which is literally biased, literally created for a European person. So the system is meant to rob you of your confidence, whether it's saying that, oh, you can only test into these classes. It's meant to rob you of your confidence, and it's meant to propel specific individuals who are not going to be over representative of the class, of the body, student body, them as being these stars. I think it's very funny. I don't know about you, but I think about the people who made like class president and everything in my high school. A lot of them basically living a normal life, and you have people who, didn't even get that type of award, who basically are doing better. These systems that create this hierarchy, is the hierarchy truly reflective, or is it meant to destroy the confidence of those who are aspiring to do great things? I think it's the latter, personally.
recently graduated and joined AmeriCorps. Her mom continues to help parents like Sharice, whose 14-year-old Tori needs extra support.
Okay, so the boy is eating ice cream. Excellent, excellent. Good job.
You give your daughter so much love and attention. Was she getting this in public school?
No. No, of course not to this level.
The families of the Melanin Village and Engage Detroit hope that their groups inspire school systems to get creative, take kids out of rigid routines, and ensure they are welcoming all kinds of learners.
Do you think the schools are going to listen? I mean, the system, does it see what's happening?
I think on individual scales that yes, that there are schools who will. Now, if we're talking about the system overall, I think that gets into things that are a bit deeper. I don't want my child to be the guinea pig in the midst.
I have to repeat that. I don't want my child to be the guinea pig, because you're always going to have politicians that are coming in with these solutions. Oh, let's try this with charter schools. Let's try this with semi-charter schools. Let's try this with these enrichment programs. All these new ideas. Peer-reviewed scholars come in and give their prognosis as far as what they're going to do to change the situation. Has it ever changed the situation? No. That has to be the question. No matter what they promise you, has it ever been to change the situation? No. Is your child being used as a guinea pig to try to use to say, okay, well, we can do this with this child? Probably. And that's so the real question is the system going to change? What she answered was very true. Maybe individuals will wake up, but will the system change? The system's doing what it's designed to do. I talked about this in my book, Fostering False Identity. That systems analysis, the system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Don't let it fool you with these, oh, the system's supposed to do this for us, supposed to propel us this way or that way. No, it's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So don't let these people, these politicians who tell you otherwise, make you think that the system's going to change. Don't let them fool you. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
Figuring this out.
Some parents make this work by...
Okay, so this is the end of this video. I have another video, but I think I might actually save it for another presentation, and we're just going to keep this moving. Because I have some things I want to go through for those of you who are considering homeschool, and I don't want to make this video too long. So first thing I want to do is I want to just give you some legal standards. I don't know why this... Okay, here we go. Like I said, all of these will be available on the Patreon group if you want to just have instant access. But so let's go through the basic constitutional framework when it comes to homeschooling. So the case Meyer v. Nebraska, Supreme Court case 1920s, the fundamental right of parents to direct the education of their children was established. You as a parent, you do in the United States have a fundamental right to direct the direction of your children's education. Now, don't run away now and say, aha, I'm good. I can direct my children's education, because as with everything, when it comes to law, it's very slick in how they can say one thing and then deplete your rights in that type of way. But on a basis, on a foundation, they do say that you have a right to direct your child's education. The question is, how much does the state have a right to impose their will on your children's education? So the litigation inside of this area really centers on whether or not you're giving them an equivalent education or a private school. So basically, when you decide that you want to educate your child in a different way, they're going to look at, if you decide to litigate the case and you have problems and you decide to take it to the courts, are you giving them something that is equivalent inside of your setting to what is being offered by the school system? So a private school, for example, you could say is equivalent. You could say it still has the requirements of standardized testing. It still has the requirements of, different aspects of the system. So many people will be satisfied to say that your private school is equivalent. Now, you're going to find out when we go through this presentation, it really depends on your state as far as how much you really can direct your child's education. Some states are like hands off. You can do what you want. This is your child. Direct your child's education. Other states are very, very difficult. And that's why, a lot of people, I remember our brother Kanada, who's been on this channel many times, he's mentioned that our people probably should repatriate to the South, those of us who are staying in the United States. Obviously, those of us who are leaving the United States, we probably have more options depending on what country you're going to. If you're staying in the United States, he said you should probably repatriate to the South. I do think that in the here and now, that's a very smart idea, depending on the state for sure. So a lot of people who have tried to litigate the issue of public education rely on a free exercise clause. The free exercise clause meaning that constitutionally you are afforded to exercise your religion freely. You're not supposed to have your religion imposed on by the state. That's the idea behind it. The big people who are known to really have directed this right and pushed it, and who I think we have to really strongly consider as being people who have it right, are the Amish. A lot of people don't want to be separate. A lot of people want to be a part of the system. The Amish people, the Amish religion, is one that's has been separate for a long time, and they litigated inside of the case Wisconsin v. Yoder, their right to direct their child's education. We're going to go through that case in a little bit. But essentially, the Amish people are able to pretty much be separate because they've established their own system with their own protocols, their own purpose, their own following their own religious doctrines. And because of that, they've been allowed to be separate. Now, is that going to continue to be the case? There's a lot of talk that the Amish people have suffered because of their push to be separate, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. But as of right now, they have been allowed to really have their own separate system and homeschool their children as they see fit. So let's actually go to that case right now, Wisconsin v. Yoder. Make this bigger for you. Okay, I'm just going to read through the syllabus. The syllabus is basically the Cliff Notes, and I'm going to read through part of the decision that was upheld. So it says, syllabus, respondents, members of the Old Order Amish religion and the conservative Amish Mennonite Church were convicted of violating Wisconsin's compulsory school attendance law, which requires a school child's attendance until they are 16, by declining to send their children to public or private school after they had graduated from the 8th grade. The evidence showed that the Amish provide continuing informal vocational education to their children designed to prepare them for life in the rural Amish community. The evidence also showed that respondents sincerely believed that high school attendance was contrary to the Amish religion and way of life. That's a big claim, but they backed it up. And they would endanger their own salvation and that of their children by complying with the law. The state Supreme Court sustained respondents' claim that application of the compulsory school attendance law to them violated their right under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment, made applicable to the states by the 14th Amendment, that's the Due Process Clause. So what was held by the court? Again, this is the Cliff Notes version, but 1, The state's interest in universal education is not totally free from a balancing process when it impinges on other fundamental rights, such as those specifically protected by the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment and the traditional interest of parents with respect to religious upbringing of their children. So basically, the state is going to argue, let's say you get hauled into court for homeschooling. The state will probably argue that it's in their interest, the state's interest, to have this universal education system for all children. And the question is, does their interest outweigh your interests as far as directing your child's education? Now, again, this case relied on the Free Exercise Clause. If you don't have a religious reason for keeping your child out of school, you don't have the Free Exercise Clause. So that's just something to keep in mind. But in this case, the Free Exercise Clause, the free exercise of your religion, is a fundamental right recognized by the Constitution from its inception. And the question is, does the state's interest outweigh that interest? And the court said that it does not. Respondents have amply supported their claim that enforcement of compulsory formal education requirement under the 8th grade would gravely endanger, if not destroy, the free exercise of their religious beliefs. Again, that's something that they were able to establish. But if you're not able to establish that as far as this precedent, then you might want to look for another state, if you're inside of a state that comes down hard on educating your own children. Aided by a history of 3 centuries as identifiable religious sect and a long history as a successful and self-sufficient segment of American society, the Amish have demonstrated their sincerity of their religious beliefs, the interrelationship of belief in their mode of life, the vital role that belief in daily conduct play in the continuing survival of the old order Amish communities, and the hazards presented by the state's enforcement of a statute generally valid as to others. So this is something that I always have a problem with, is that when it comes to a lot of these Supreme Court cases, these are people who have had time to develop a case record. They have time to evidence the fact that we are sincere about our beliefs. This case was in the 70s. It says they had 300 years of a history of doing these things. Well, obviously, if you're starting today, or if you have a religious belief that has been created or developed, I don't want to say created, developed, more recently, that I do need to be separate from this system. Well, if you don't have that 300 years history to use inside of a litigation setting, are you able to defend it? And, that's going to be an issue for you. But as for the Amish, they've been doing this for a long time. And so no time like the present to get started if you're trying to find an alternative to your current education system. So, and it said, beyond this, they've carried the difficult burden of demonstrating the adequacy of their alternative mode of continuing informal vocational education. In terms of the overall sect that the state relies on in support of its program of compulsory high school education. In light of this showing and weighing the minimal difference between what the state would require and what the Amish already accept, it was incumbent on the state to show, with more particularity, how it admittedly strong interest in compulsory education would adversely affect by granting the exemption to the Amish. So more of what I was saying before, the balancing test. Could the state really show that what the Amish would lose as far as their fundamental right to education, or to direct their child's education into the free exercise of religion, could the state show that their interests outweighed the one of the Amish community? And the court found that it did not. Lastly, the states claimed that it was empowered as parens patriae. We're going to talk about that in a second. Parens patriae, to extend the benefit of secondary education to children regardless of the wishes of their parents, cannot be sustained against a free exercise claim of the nature revealed by this record. For the Amish have introduced convincing evidence that accommodating the religious objection by forging 1 or 2 additional years of compulsory education will not impair the physical or mental health of the child or result in an inability to be self-supporting or to discharge the duties and responsibilities of citizenship, or in any other way materially detract from the welfare of society. The parens patriae is a very important right to understand. The same way that the U.S. Constitution recognizes that you have a right as a parent to direct your child's education. So they also recognize that the state is the parent of the children. And that's something that is going to be a conflict to you, particularly African people, because this parenting responsibility of the state essentially says that you can parent to a certain degree, but that's when we step in. You can go so far, and that's when we go basically come in with imposing our understanding of what is best for your child. Now, in this case, the states claim a parens patriae, the policing power really over your family, over your children, was found that it does not extend to the Amish, because again, the Amish had been able to show very convincing evidence that their religious beliefs were sincere, that their mode of education was sufficient, it was equivalent. And so because of that, the Supreme Court sided with the Amish. But again, it's important to understand that the state is putting a lot of stress or a lot of requirements on you as a parent in order to show that you actually do have the right to withdraw your child from the public education system. So it's an interesting case. You should read the whole thing. Again, it'll be available on the Patreon group. I want to go to some more talk about education. So the big thing you should understand, let's read through this real quick. So according to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, the power to regulate all forms of education belongs to the states. Okay, so that in itself might seem like, well, maybe I have some problems as far as homeschooling. Well, it says, as recognized as a form of education, homeschooling is included in this protection. The Constitution states that the federal government is not allowed to interfere with or control public or private forms of education. So what that means is that this is not a federal thing. This is not something that, as of right now, the federal government of the United States is telling you whether or not you can homeschool your child or on what basis you can homeschool your child. It just depends on your state. And that's why we were talking about earlier, you might have to find another state to go to if you really are serious about homeschooling. Now, in spite of this, it's well known that the federal government interferes in education on a frequent basis. This is done by exercising a federal power included in the Constitution to regulate commerce and to collect and distribute money among the states, often referred to as the power of the purse, meaning the federal government can come in to a state and say, hey, we want you to have this requirement in your education system. And the state could say, no, we're not going to do it. Well, the federal government says, okay, well, we're not going to give you funds for this road project that has nothing to do with your with the children's education. And because states want more money, they'll probably just enact the regulation. Now, some states are like, shove it when it comes to this type of stuff. We know some like that comes to mind down south, Texas, for example. Okay, fine, keep your money. We're still not going to do what you want us to do. But it's important to know that while the federal government does not directly come in and tell different states what to do as far as the education system, they do have ways to push for their will. And that main way is the power of the purse. So the federal government uses this as a loophole to control the education by offering the states money if they enact specific laws. Typically, these laws only affect educational institutions that accept federal funds. Since homeschoolers do not accept any federal funds, none of these federal rules apply to them. So this is going to be, I think, my prediction, an issue that's hotly contested in the future. Whether or not or how the federal government can possibly control homeschooling if more people do withdraw from the education system. Now, is that going to happen today or tomorrow? Hopefully not, but it could become a problem where the federal government is like, okay, too many of people are deciding to homeschool. How are we going to find a way to still control what's being taught, how it's being taught, to control the families? And if we can't enact the power of the purse, maybe we have to have some stronger legislation that says that we can direct the education system. Not a problem now, but could become a problem in the future. So this is the point what I was making. The states with the lowest levels of regulation, like Oklahoma, New Jersey, Texas, they require no notice. No notice if you live in Oklahoma, New Jersey, Texas. You can just basically go and teach your child. I was actually surprised to see this with New Jersey because I lived in New Jersey, and New Jersey is basically like baby New York. So I was surprised. But yes, Oklahoma, New Jersey, Texas, no notice. You can just simply decide to homeschool your child and go and proceed. States with low regulation may only require that parents notify the appropriate authorities. Some examples is Arizona, Kentucky, Nebraska. A few examples of states with moderate levels of regulation include Tennessee, Virginia, Colorado, And requirements include notification and turning in some form of evaluation, such as a test. States with highest levels of regulation include New York, Pennsylvania, and North Dakota. They require notification, test scores, or professional evaluation, and other requirements such as curriculum approval, complex paperwork, or home visits. Basically, if you live in states with the highest levels of regulation, you're going to have some stress when it comes to homeschooling your child. They're not going to make this easy for you at all. I think so. I have a link in here that I want to go to. Let's see. Slow internet. That's why I download my videos nowadays. All right, here we go. So we're going to go through this. It says, find my state. You can see right here, you have states that have no notice, low regulation, moderate regulation, and high regulation. So really the states that are going to give you the most difficult time when it comes to educating your own child right here. Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and this is a part of New York, so New York. These are the states that you basically are going to have a lot of stress trying to educate your own child. Moderate regulation, you have South Dakota, North Dakota, so a lot of these states right here, it's kind of scattered. Then you have low regulation. This is like basically all of this from all right here all the way over here. You have a good time homeschooling your child. Surprised that California is a part of that. And then no regulation, Texas, Alaska, Oklahoma. You don't want to tell your school district anything, that's where you want to be. So if you're in this corner and you really feel a certain way about your child's education and you really want to direct it, there's some states nearby that you can possibly go to. If you want a no regulation state, you have New Jersey or Connecticut. If you want a no regulation state, you can go all the way down here. So there's some options for you if you're really serious about homeschooling. You don't want to deal with the stress. But to understand what type of stress we're talking about, let's go into Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, my home state. So let's look at what you're going to be required to do if you are homeschooling in Pennsylvania. You have several legal options. So homeschooling under this homeschool statute, homeschooling with a private tutor, enrolling your child in a satellite of a religious day school, enrolling your child in a satellite of an accredited boarding school. Okay, there's some requirements I wanted to go to. Let me go back and see if I can find that. Okay, well, let's go through right here. So, notifications required. You don't need teachers qualifications except it says option 1. Okay, here we go. I think this is where it goes into it. Okay, so option 1, homeschooling under the homeschool statute. So you have to ensure that you have the required qualifications to teach. You must have at least a high school diploma or its equivalent to teach a homeschool. That's one kind of stupid, if you ask me, but kind of stupid requirement. But you have to graduate from high school. You have to get a notarized affidavit that's going to have the name of the parent, supervisor, name of the child, assurances they're taught English, outline of proposed education objective, evidence of immunization. So they star this. So let's see what they're talking about. Basically, your parents conducting a homeschool education program submit a certificate of immunization, of a record of immunization to school officials as proof of immunization. So if you wanted to get your child over taking a certain solution, quote unquote, to a certain problem, and you said, I'll homeschool my child, and you're in Pennsylvania, it looks like this is not the route to go. Homeschooling is not going to get you out of having to get your child immunized. Evidence of health and medical services required by law, certification of the homeschool program that it will comply with 24 PS 1327.1, a certification that the supervisor, all adults living within the home and persons have legal custody of the child. A lot of requirements right here. then there's more. So you're required, provide the required days, hours, instruction, teach the required subjects. You have to teach your child spelling, reading, writing, arithmetic, civics, U.S. and Pennsylvania history, health, psychology, of physiology, physical education, music, art, geography, science, safety education, so that's all for elementary, which is kind of crazy. I don't remember learning all this in elementary school in Pennsylvania. But go on, there's just a long list of things you have to teach your child. You have to maintain a portfolio, including required testing. If you're trying to get your child out of standardized testing, this is not going to work for you if you're trying to do it inside of this state. Still have to give your child standardized testing in the 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade. You must have your child tested with a nationally normalized standardized test approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Education or the statewide test administered to public school students. The test results in math and reading, language, arts, or the results of the statewide test must be included in an annual portfolio. A parent or guardian may not be the test administrator. Your child has to be evaluated by an evaluator. Submit the evaluator certification to the superintendent by June 30th. I mean, this is crazy, right? Here's what you have to do if you move to one district or another. Contact the superintendent of your current district by registered mail. So this is just a crazy amount of requirements. Let's just, for comparison's sake, let's go next door to Ohio or Indiana. Sorry. In fact, no, let's go to New Jersey. I'm actually curious to see because I'm a previous New Jersey resident. Okay, so New Jersey, give your child an education that's academically equivalent to what he or she would receive at school. Doesn't have to be identical. If a parent's making a good faith effort to give their child education that is appropriate for the child's age, covers major subjects, the courts have not ordered them to stop homeschooling. So, for comparison purposes, the New Jersey public high schools usually offer instructions in these areas. This is really what it should be if you ask me. Basic, hey, this is what we advise, this is what we teach. Give your child something equivalent, do that, and you're basically off the hook. All right, this is the last thing we're going to go to. Now, you might move to another state and you feel like, okay, cool, I'm good. Is that long term? Are you still going to be able to go without thinking about homeschool for that long? That's a good question. I'm not personally sure, but I do want to go to this statute. This is actually in Germany. A European court ruled against a German homeschooling family. This is where I think the world's going. I'll be honest. I think the world's going towards more state control, less flexibility. And I think very soon it could be an issue wherever you live. Now, this is just my thoughts, my conspiratorial mind, you might think, but this is what I'm thinking. So the European Court of Human Rights ruled against a German family from the state of Hesse that they have been fighting for years for the right to homeschool their children, a practice that is illegal in Germany. It's illegal to homeschool your child in Germany. This family had argued that the government violated their Article 8 rights of the European Convention on Human Rights, which guarantees the protection of privacy of the home and family life by forcing their 4 children to attend a local school. The court found, however, that the family had not provided sufficient evidence that the children were properly educated and socialized, emphasize socialized. And this is why I think that homeschooling, will it always be an option? Does the state have an agenda when it comes to education? Yes, it's not just about educating your child. Education is socialization. Education is control. The education system has been used to socialize and control. They weren't teaching you fake U.S. history for a reason. They were teaching that to you because this is how they're going to socialize you into the system. So there's an agenda behind that. The government removing children from their parents to ensure that they receive education, they said, did not violate this Article 8. In their ruling, the ECHR, European Court of Human Rights, noted that the troubling statement by the father that implied the children were the property of the parents. He said the authorities have a duty to protect children. This is a big contested argument. Are children property? I don't think you could say property. This is why we get in danger of you by using these terms that come from European culture and society. It's not an issue of property, but there is an issue of a family unit being a unit. It's not a property issue. It's a unit issue. Can you separate my child from me and say that this child is not yours, this child is the state's? Because they're saying basically it's not the property of your parents, it's the property of the states. So officials stood before our door. It was the most horrible day. It's going through what the family went through. The school has, okay, let's go down. So this is why he wanted to teach his children. He said, teachers do less in the classroom and expect children to do the most of their work and learning as homework anyways. He and his wife taught their children with the assistance of a Christian distance learning school that had offered to have relevant authorities check up on them anytime. He disputed the allegations that his offspring were not properly socialized, highlighting their participation in various clubs and organizations. He added that, well, let's go back. Clubs and organizations, that he misunderstood the agenda. It's not just about your children being around people in society. When they say socialize, they mean they want to create an agent of the state. That's what the agenda is. It's not just that you are able to be around other people or kids and have friends. No, that's not what socialization is. They're trying to put and create a certain agent of the state. He added that he believed that the family circle to be the best environment for children. They considered moving to another EU country with homeschooling is legal, such as France, but they were not allowed to move if they didn't have full custody of their child at the time. So the state took their children, so they couldn't move. So this has been a part of German law since 1919. This is something that I think we should keep in mind because honestly, you notice a lot of things that happen in Europe do come to the US. So is there going to be a time where the federal government does step in? If homeschool starts happening in mass, which a lot of people have been talking about it more and more because of the environment that we're in current society, if it continues, then yeah, I think that this could be an issue. I think you're going to see more people trying to find ways to regulate it. And it probably won't be on an open floor discussion in Congress. It'll probably be something that they try to do and hidden behind closed doors. But this, as of today, is speculation. As of today, we do have the right to homeschool our children. And so you should possibly find a state that will be most conducive to you. If you're willing to deal with the regulations, then deal with the regulations. But just consider the benefits. Consider the benefits, consider the detriments to your child, consider what is best for them. That's really what best thing that we can do as African parents. So that's really it for today. Again, the plan is to do these streams for the Black Child Advocacy Network every Sunday. So Sunday evening if you're based on the East Coast of the United States. So hopefully that will work out. Just keep in mind, however, that things change as far as whether or not I'm able to upload based on what's happening with the electric grid. So that's the reason why might not be so consistent, but that's the plan. Again, I encourage you to join the Patreon group. The link is down below. That is where you'll get access to the links from today's presentation and future links. You can also explore different things that are available on the Patreon group, such as individual consultations, or whether or not you want access to my book, Fostering False Identity, the digital copy. So there are different things that are available depending on what plan you want to join. With that, I will see you all next week, and I hope you all took this message seriously. Definitely think about it, contemplate it, see what's going on with your child's education. But with that, I will wrap this up. I'll see you all next week.